on. I'm just going to do this screen share thing and hope it works. Hang on. Where am I? Here. Is that right?
Yeah, that's working.
Yay. Can everybody sit? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Before I start, right, great stuff. Okay, well, thanks for that introduction. Yes, I am Toni Kershaw, number 2 speaker at Calderdale Council, as Nick so lovely introduced me as. So, yeah, I've worked at Calderdale 15 years, actually 15 years last month, and most of which it's flown, particularly the last 12 months. It feels like everything happened, nothing happened, but it's gone so quickly. And, you know, as feet haven't really touched the ground, have they? Furlough, what's furlough? You know, a lot of us have been doing everything, you know, going outside our job roles and doing all sorts of extra bits and pieces. So it's been an extremely busy time, particularly if you're in local government. So I used to work for the private sector before I started at Calderdale, and I worked for several years at a company called Nestle or Nestles. And back then we didn't talk about CX or UX or any of those things. We just talked about really being passionate about customers and putting them at the heart of everything that we do. And that's just something that I've carried on with my career at Calderdale as sort of something that I really value. So I'm sure you've all heard of Calderdale, but if not, you will have heard of Halifax, I'm sure, which is our main town. And it's been put on the map by the BBC series Gentleman Jack, if you've watched that. And our area was really going through a resurgence in terms of tourists before the dreaded C word happened. Calderdale also appears on the news every time it rains because we are prone to flooding. And I think since 2006, we've probably had some really serious floods twice a year at least that I'm aware of, which, you know, is a real shame and has been a real blow to us, to be honest, as a district and a borough. But it's kept us very busy, that's for sure. So, you know, I'll touch on flooding and just how chat has helped us around flooding scenarios a bit later on in the presentation. So Nick's asked me to cover a few things with you all today. It was really around how the digital assistant that we've got has helped us manage demand through the pandemic. But I have sort of, I will talk through a potted history of how we got from where we were to where we are now. And it may cover some of the things that you've all been asking about through the previous presentation, which is obviously mainly around the discovery and the user research. So mine will talk more about the actual implementation and how that's gone for us. There'll be loads of questions, I suspect, and we might not get around to answering a lot of them today, but I can speak to any of you about anything with regards to metrics, how we've measured our success, return on investment stuff, implementations, customer research. There'll be a whole host of things that I won't get time to cover in detail, but I'm really happy to speak to anybody about outside of this this Zoom call. So yeah, I'll move on. I mean, what we've done, it's not perfect by any stretch, but it's a million miles away from where we were. So just to put things into context, in 2013 and 14, when we sort of started looking at channel shift and really putting some measures as to where we were and where we wanted to go, 70% of people were contacting us by phone at that point. We were getting about £4 million paid online, about 150 online forms, which, you know, was pretty good going, but most of those weren't integrated. So most of them were just coming through as an email, and then some poor soul was having to sit and key them onto a back office system. So it looked okay for the customer, but wasn't very efficient or great for our team. And we were getting about 1 million unique web visits. So I know people measure web visits in all sorts of different ways. We just deal with unique web visits because it's a stat that we've always used, and it's a constant. So that's the one that we stick with. So it wasn't the worst position to be in, but there was lots of room for improvement. And customers were clearly happy to go online. We knew that from our analytics and from speaking to customers. But it wouldn't take much for them to channel hop. So I think, you know, we've already touched on this earlier, that if you're not quickly getting the information that you're looking for, you'll reach out, you'll go down other methods. Not only that, if you're not getting the answer that you want through one channel, you'll try a few different ones to see if you get a different answer. And that's what we were experiencing, probably still do to some extent, but to a lesser extent than we did back then. We had a look at web chat. We were offered it by our CRM provider, who was Oracle, at a really reasonable cost. So we had a chat with other councils and who were embarking on this journey. Leeds were fairly, you know, down the road with using chat. And so we went over there and we had a look at how they were using it and the successes they were having with it. And it just became apparent to us that it would be something that we could implement fairly quickly and fairly cheaply for us, and but would have huge benefits. And the main one for us at that time was that it would support the customer to stay online. So we never really wanted to view it as another channel. We really wanted it as a support for people who were already online, and that's how we were viewing it. So in little over 2 years, so by about 16, 17, there was a really big shift in how customers were transacting with us, and some really significant savings as a result of that. So many of you were probably working through similar improvement programs at the time. It seems that we're going on these journeys together, even though we're at different points in those. And you'll know that it's not easy, and it really requires some tenacity and some perseverance with your stakeholders, with your customers, with your teams. It's a tough old job to get to where you want to be. And our chat function certainly evolved over the years. So Calderdale Council was an early implementer of the 24/7 chat solution. And that's something that really helped flatten our Monday peak, particularly around email. So we do get a lot of chat coming through out of hours when our team isn't there. And we have an out of hours team that look after those. And it was also it was a really good tool for business continuity, really around emergency situations. So a great example of this would be the floods. Flooding always seems to happen in very unsociable hours. 2015, it was Boxing Day when it decided to absolutely sile it down for a period of 48 hours and absolutely devastate our borough. But having a chat solution meant that, you know, people who had laptops at home could just get straight on at home. That, you know, it was a really good tool for us to have. So we could really use it anytime, any place, anywhere, really. So, and it really opened up our availability for responding to customers. So by March last year, pre-pandemic, only around about 30% of our contact was over the phone, and less than 7% was in person. And the rest was made up of chat, web visits and online forms. And I do really believe, and still do, that implementing a chat solution and having that real-time dialogue with customers about their online journey and acting on their feedback has made a significant difference to our channel shift programme. In 2018, we worked with Connect Assist to implement Oracle's Virtual Assistant, as it was known at the time. And we ran a competition to name it, and we had some really funny and creative and sometimes rude suggestions. But in the end, we went with VERA, and that stands for Virtual Interactive Responsive Assistant. It's also quite a northern thing, because we talk about our Vera, like on Coronation Street. So we quite like the name Vera for her. And really the key, and I think somebody's touched on this earlier, with regards to sort of doing the research side. We didn't do a discovery program and user research like has just been described so eloquently before me. But we did spend a lot of time on research. So I'll talk a little bit about what we did there and how we used customer insight. So really, getting it set up properly is where you're going to get the value, and spending the time on that is really worthwhile. And what we did is we created a set of intents. So an intent is something that is like a group of different questions that might ask the same thing. So for example, the intent might be help with my council tax, but include the questions, things like I can't pay my council tax, I'm struggling to pay my council tax, I need help with my rates. So bundling all those things up into one thing that gives you a static answer. And I've got an insight team, and they used emails and existing chat transcripts to review how customers contact us about council tax, because that's what we were going with first. That's what it was quite a risky strategy, but we were using the chatbot to deal with our council tax queries first. So by using the emails and the existing chat transcripts that we had stored in the system, that gave us an indication of the dialect that people use, the names that people use. So people still refer to council tax as poll tax, for example. So we spent a lot of time looking through those things to be able to pull together a set of intents and questions that customers might ask us. And we looked at the language that they used, and you know, the phrases, and it was really important that we did that, because otherwise, like was touched on by Lewis and Neil, it will certainly fail if you're not able to, if the bot isn't able to respond because it doesn't understand what's being asked of it, then you're just setting yourself up for a fall, really. So even though I've not gone into massive detail around that user research that we did do much more than what I've described. It's just that for the purposes of today, I'm just going to keep it brief. So we launched Vera in March 2019, specifically for council tax, to help manage demand around the annual billing. So I've made a few notes from earlier about people asking things, and about how it might help with these peaks and troughs in demand. So this is one thing that we identified it for. And because we'd already had chat on our website for quite some time, and customers were quite used to using it, they were quite happy to use the chatbot, really. It does identify itself as a chatbot. So you do know that that is who you are speaking to. And the way that it's routed is that on our front end, we've got a drop down where, what do you want to talk to us about today? And if the person chooses council tax, if the customer chooses council tax, they will be presented with the bot. And then we've got certain mechanisms in place. So if the customer says, I want to speak to a human, or if a couple of attempts at conversation fail, that call will be escalated then to an actual advisor who's managing chat, so to a human person. And it'll take the history of the conversation through with it, so that the customer's not having to repeat themselves. We'll be able to easily get a gist of what it was that they wanted. So when we went live with it, like I say, people were using it, and really it was answering around 70% of things correctly without escalating to a human. And that sort of showed that the work that we'd done in terms of the customer insight and the user research was quite, was really good. Obviously we could improve it. I think, if we can get to like golden 80% that people talk about, the 80-20 thing, then we would have been happy with that. So for the first sort of few weeks and months, we did tweak the content. I think Lewis said earlier about making sure that, what you've got is right, and putting that time and investment into tweaking it to make sure that it is suitable for your customers to use, and that they are going to use it. So we did spend some time doing that. So as the months went on, we did feel fairly confident that we could use it for waste and recycling. Now, we've already talked about waste and recycling. Yes, it may seem that it's not an emotive topic, but believe me, until you've spoken to somebody about a bin that's been missed 2 weeks in a row, it is a very emotive thing that people do get the knickers in a twist about, because they see it as the one thing that they're getting that they get for the council tax. So they do get quite emotional about it. So we did spend some time sort of looking at, again, doing the research into the emails and the chat transcripts, listening to phone calls, doing a lot of testing internally and externally to make sure that we got this one right. And we wanted to sort of do this around the Christmas period to help with demand that naturally comes at Christmas, usually because of bad weather or bank holidays and things like that, disruptions to service. So we went live hoping that it didn't cause more issues than it solved, and we tied it in with a marketing campaign where we sort of did a launch around something along the lines of ask Vera if you can recycle your Christmas card and things like that. So all the things that we get asked at Christmas anyway, you know, what can we do with this Christmas trees? Will you take my extra tins and cans because we've been having a right good session over Christmas? All those sorts of things. And by this time, I'd also recruited a digital advisor, and their primary role was to monitor the exchanges with customers and do these tweaks and amendments where they were necessary. So that was a bit of a journey up until sort of March. I know I've kind of rushed through some things, and no doubt you'll have some questions around that. But you know, really, I was asked to talk about what we did during the pandemic and helping demand there. So like everyone else in this virtual room, we knew that there would be a big increase from customers, and it wouldn't be long before there'd be people in financial difficulty, or they would need assistance through our volunteer schemes, or they had questions around other support that they would be able to get. And as well as that, we had our leisure centres closing, our theatres closing, disruptions to our waste service, and just really all the things that we had to react to in terms of Boris's daily, weekly, monthly announcements. So quite often he'd be announcing some scheme on a Monday that we had very limited notice for, but customers were expecting that by that next day they would be able to apply for a business grant, they would be able to apply for isolation payments and all those sorts of things. So on top of that, we obviously had our face-to-face offices closed, so demand was going to increase through other channels naturally anyway. And even though our contact centre, 60% of them were already set up to work from home, we had to get other people, we had to get kit and other things set up for them, and that didn't happen overnight. If anyone else was in the same position, you'll know that every man and his dog wanted laptops, so you know, supply was very limited, and there were long delays on deliveries for those. So straight away we thought, right, well, our digital assistant can definitely help with the demand here, and really mean that the skilled advisors that we did have on the phone could deal with the more complex issues and some of the new issues that customers were experiencing. You know, the digital assistant would be able to deal with the lower value contact that was more simple for it to deal with. And it's really been a joined up effort between the web team and comms and customer services. So I think it's been already touched on about customers will use different channels to get the answers that they want, and you need that consistency in your responses. So we made sure that we all linked up, and that anything that was going out on social media didn't contradict information that we might be giving out on the website or giving out via the human chat or via the digital assistant chatbot. And we created some brand new intents, so things specifically around COVID, and we were able to amend ones that we already had in the system. So if it was something that somebody was asking about council tax, we might have already had an intent there that would be able to help them. So with regards to like council tax reduction, for example, so we would just put in the words COVID and coronavirus in to those intents to just expand them to be able to respond to that, those are the questions that we were getting from customers. And again, these were closely monitored by our digital advisor, who was able to amend and add, delete intents and responses as required. So it's quite important for me to say at this point that the digital assistant that we have, once it's been implemented, really can be managed by operational staff. It doesn't require any, you know, great technical skills. You don't have to have coding or anything like that. It can all be done by operational people who are the best people to do it, because they're able to react very quickly to what's going on. I also manage the web team, which does make it easier, because obviously they are within customer services, and what that means is that I'm not having to jump through hoops to get them to amend content or you know, put things onto the website in response to some of the COVID announcements. It can all be done at the same time to make sure that those messages are consistent, because I think, you know, the one thing that we can agree on is that that is really important, that the customers are getting that consistent and correct information. Our software that we use also comes with a really good reporting dashboard, and that gives us really valuable insight into how successful the exchanges with customers have been. So I don't have a slide to show you that, unfortunately, but I can speak with people after this about how we monitor those exchanges and what prompts us to make those tweaks and amendments that I've talked about, and making sure that there's that consistency in place. It is a continuous review process. You know, I think Neil said about having a team of people working on this and the importance of that. Yes, it is really important. It's not something that you can necessarily automate. So, you know, you do need some dedicated resource for this, which is something that you obviously have to consider in your business cases if that's the route that you're considering going down. But we still see it as something that's really fundamental and critical to supporting our customers online. One good thing that's come out of it, which probably will make some of the user research people on this call think, oh God, no, but we've not had to go through these really long implementation and testing sort of experiences that we might have done before the pandemic. So we've just been doing things really quickly, putting things on in real time, and really the testing's being done with customers. But because it's such an adaptive system and the product's so agile, we don't feel that that's been a great detriment to the customer experience. We are able to make updates to the system really quickly, so it's not been a massive problem for us, and it is something that will make us rethink how we do implementations going forward, and do we need all that time for sort of the testing and the evaluation in certain circumstances. You know, that might not always be necessary. So somebody asked earlier about what our customers think of it, and you know, we have a survey on the end of our chats, even if whether it's through a human chat or whether it's through the chatbot, where customers can give their feedback. And you know, they're using it, so that's a really good indicator that it's, you know, they like it. For council tax alone, we've seen a 250% increase in customers who use the digital assistant to answer their queries compared to the same period the previous year. So that was really encouraging. The most popular question getting asked to Vera is, I have changed my address, which is probably no surprise to anybody. That's been superseded since the pandemic by, I need help with my council tax. So obviously the responses in there will be around payment holidays, setting up different payment arrangements. It's not integrated with our council tax back office system. I think it's important to be upfront about that at this stage. It does do some signposting back to the website and sort of some guidance for how customers can apply for these things, but it won't answer account specific questions at this moment in time because we haven't done that integration yet. We were told by our leisure centres that they would need to close, and we were expecting that we would get a lot of contact from customers around their membership. So we worked with the service, and in less than a day, we'd set up a series of questions and intents to respond to those inquiries, which customers seemed more than happy to use. And again, 80% were being answered satisfactorily at their first point of contact. So yeah, like I said, there is a survey at the end, and you know, they can give their feedback on the digital experience that they've had with us. What we'll usually find is if they didn't get the response that they wanted, so we're not coming back within 5 minutes to collect their bin, they will give us a low score. But we do get some really good feedback, particularly from people that are grateful that they can get responses out of hours to something that they, you know, that they need to know, and sort of a reluctance to engage with it with a chatbot, but actually it's been a positive experience, so you know they would use it again. I just wanted to talk briefly about my teams and how they've sort of embraced this world. Some of them have been quite suspicious about this technology in the past. You know, it's probably something that a few of you have experienced before, this perception that robots are going to be taking over their roles, and you know, is this a move to phase people out and replace them with a chatbot and AI and all those sorts of things. But to be honest, since the pandemic, they've really seen the value of Vera, our chatbot, and how, if she's used effectively, it can ease pressure on them and their sanity, and leave them to deal with the more complex things and help customers that really need to speak to somebody, as opposed to something that can be done quite simply through a bot style assistant. So just to finish off, because I've been waffling on for ages, but since the start of the pandemic, Vera has had over 13,000 exchanges with customers, with around 80% being answered at the first point of contact. It's usually higher than that, usually sits around 83%. And through our normal web chat, we've had about 11,000 chats. So if you were looking at, most of those would have happened over the phone, well, all of them probably, rather than using the bot. That's quite a lot of contact that we've been able to avoid, and quite a lot of pressure avoided for a team that are already under significant pressure. So we will be investing in this channel going forward, and we're going to be shortly migrating to an improved digital assistant, again through Oracle, which provides a much more conversational way of interacting with customers, that's a lot more efficient and convenient for them. We did have to put some of our plans on hold because of the pandemic, but hoping to pick those things up fairly quickly. We're also doing some integration with Gov Notifies so that we can take advantage of the technology there, but have it integrated through our CRM and through our chat software, so that customers can get emails and texts, etc. And like I say, it was, even though I've spoke for ages, it is quite brief, because there's so much to cover. You know, we could talk about this all day. So if anybody does want to pick anything up with me offline, then feel free to contact me anytime. And I'm quite happy to go through our journey in more detail. So that's me done. Thank you very much for listening.
Excellent. Excellent from the newly crowned #1 speaker from Calderdale Council. People, can you put your cameras on? Let's put your cameras, unmute your mics. Any questions, any observations, any questions for Toni? Ange Moore, you can start us off.
Just wondering, had you not already been, well versed in what you were doing when the pandemic hit, would that have been a good or a bad time to start?
Probably not the best time, to be fair, Angela. I think we were in quite a fortunate position where we did already have this as a resource that was quite mature, that we were able to, get up and going and help us with our demand. So I acknowledge, yes, we were in a fortunate position there, but I do feel that, even though every authority's got their own rules and their own regulations and their own processes and systems. There is a lot that we can share, particularly through my journey, where we've been on this journey for like 7 years, that we could help each other get things up and running much more quickly than we've been able to do, where we've done right, well, we've done this, so now we're doing this, and now we're doing this, and we've had that time and space between those little steps to, you know, get customers and teams and, you know, used to the product and how this works. So we probably wouldn't have thought to ourselves on 23rd of March, let's get a bot in now to answer some of this. I'm all for giving stuff a go, but that might be a step too far even for me.
Yeah. The reason I actually ask is quite often these things are driven by the fact that there is a burning bridge. Yeah, pandemic is a really obvious example of it, but quite often, yeah, there is a major driver that's an urgent need behind some of this, and it just strikes me that if that's where you're starting from, it's not a good place. You need to be thinking and planning more effectively ahead of that. From what you
said. I think what the pandemic might have done is, like it's done with a lot of things, is accelerate where, you know, we might not have been looking at where we've had these really long implementations and these long periods of user research, insight review and all that, and evaluation. It's kind of sped some of those things along. So I think this pandemic's done that with a lot of things, and it might just be get people thinking actually, yeah, what's this brought to the surface is that it is a pretty good tool to have, and that if we're not going to be opening up face-to-face operations, and that there is those increased demands on other channels, that is this a good thing to do now, and it might be something that you might have been thinking about for 2 years time, but actually we'll bring that forward and start having a look at doing it now.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, observations? Mr. Burnett, I see you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted because you told me to unmute, Nick, and as you know, I slavishly follow your instructions.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
But
this is true. Yeah, but I'm sure you must have, because you are Mr. Bot and Mr. Chat. You know, your opinion on this technology.
So, well, I mean, I do have loads of questions. I think they're really, some of them are echoing back some of the questions that came up in the previous presentation. And basically, I know that Tony's done some great work to address some of these, so I'm just going to feed some of these questions back, because Tony, there were a number of questions about getting feedback and the way that systems and the people around the systems can provide feedback about the volume of interactions and the type of interactions. So you did cover that with the customer satisfaction surveys that come up, but also the reporting, which says what the hit rate is on particular types of intents and the language that people use. But that question came up a couple of times, and it does sort of play into this thing of separating out the satisfactory journey from non-satisfactory journey. If people are getting good answers and they're satisfied, then that's clearly good, and they're satisfied with the journey. And the system does tell you quite a bit about that. But as long as the right people are looking at the reports and acting on what's fed back. So do you want to just talk about that for a little bit and address those questions? You did raise it in your topic, but I think there were other questions.
Well, I think for me, a really good indicator that of if you're measuring things and customer feedback would be if they didn't use the bot at all, because that would mean that our website was perfect and there was absolutely no need to use the chat function. So, you know, I think some of the feedback that we get from customers is around where they've got to, why they're actually using the chat function to start with, which is interesting, because what that then informs is that actually what was wrong on our website for them to get to that point. I think, Louisa, you talked earlier about, you know, and I think you did, Nick, about where to have the chat function. Should it be on your home page? Should it be on, you know, where to actually place it? But and to sort of overcome that, we have something called proactive chat. So it'll wait for the customer to sort of be hovering as if they need some help, and then we'll be prompted to help them in that sense. And then we can kind of engage with them about why they weren't able to find the information on the website, and if there's anything that we can do around that. So in terms of like satisfaction, there's loads of and customer engagement, and are they happy using it, and why, what's their motivations for using it. We've got a whole different, you know, we want customers to use it if it informs us in terms of making sure that we can update our website, and we can make those customer journeys better for other customers. We want customers to use it rather than dropping off and going and making a phone call to us, because they're already online, so we want to keep them online. We don't want to have it popping up unnecessarily and irritating people. So you've got, you know, we do think very carefully around that and where we place it. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm answering your question really, Tim. I think it's just, for me, it's around, it's there. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Just because it's there doesn't mean customers should use it and it's the right thing for them to do. What we don't want is, we don't want them to use it as this search function that you touched upon earlier, Nick, that it just replaces the search thing that we've got on our website anyway. So, you know, but we're quite calculated in how we use the customer feedback, in terms of not just about their interaction with the product itself, but also why did they use it, what could we do differently so that they didn't have to use it, because that would be the ultimate success, and the ultimate measure of satisfaction for me would be that it wasn't used.
Is there also an argument that potentially, depending on the how good the chatbot is, that actually it's like having a conversation with a real person, and that's what people, you know, and people will feel like they're being dealt with. You don't necessarily know. Do you make it explicitly clear that it's not a person, it's a...
Yeah, we do, and we do give them opportunity to move away from that if they don't want to stick with it. But the migration, because we're moving off this product onto another product, which is still an Oracle product, but it's an improved one. And what that'll do is it'll be a much more conversational interaction. And the reason that we're doing that is because we are going to be quite limited in what we can offer face to face, particularly in the short term. So we're looking at things like the chat being able to do a video call halfway through if the person feels that they want to actually get that human interaction, and by the bot being more conversational, it's a bit of a halfway house between digital and a human person. So, you know, some of this is a bit suck it and see, really. We should be probably embarking on a big discovery and finding out much more about what we need to be doing before we do it. But we are kind of taking a leap of faith and jumping into some of these things, and with the knowledge that over the 7-year history of us using chat, we've kind of got a really good feel for what it is our residents want, and what they will use and what they won't use.
Brilliant. Anyone else got any questions or observations at all?
Yeah, hi Nick.
Hi David.
Yeah, hi Tony. I'm just curious. You say you've hired somebody to help sort of do the analysis work and things around that. Did you find your provider helped a great deal with that? Were you forced into hiring that person, or was it just a conscious decision you wanted to do that more yourself anyway?
It was more a conscious decision, David, to be honest. We wanted somebody, you know, it could be something that could sit with my contact centre team leaders within their role, but we kind of wanted somebody who was not looking at it just exclusively from that customer side, and that they were looking at it much wider than that. Hence why we ended up getting somebody who didn't even have any knowledge of our business at all, but what they did have really good skills in was identifying where gaps were, and they'd got good skills around something that they'd done in a previous life, which was around developing this sort of functionality. So that was a decision that we went with in the end, and I do feel it's the right one, and we are going to continue with, even though that person was on a fixed term contract at the time, we are making that a permanent place in our structure.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer your question, David?
Yeah, that's been quite useful. That sounds yeah. And sorry, just another question just popped in my head. It's more curiosity, but in terms of demographics, in terms of users, so I know we've talked about different services perhaps being more appropriate and or not, but in terms of demographics, is, you know, just off the top of my head, it would feel as if younger people are more likely to use this than older, but that's just probably just a big assumption on my side. And I just wondered, did you have any research or since then, and did COVID change that at all?
I mean, we don't do anything specifically on demographics and sort of looking at the user aspect of our chat function. We do know from the analytics that we do on our website that, you know, a high proportion of people using it are in an older age group. Now, you know, there's other demographics just in terms of, yes, it might be the younger people that would normally use chat, but it's not generally young people that interact with local authorities. So on that, you know, I just know from the people who call us and having a really good knowledge of working in our contact centre along many moons ago when I first started, that people who ring us do generally tend to be from a certain demographic. So if you were looking at it that way, it would suggest that people that are using this are not necessarily younger people, because younger people don't really tend to get in touch with local authority anyway. My son wouldn't, you know, he's 22, he wouldn't dream of ever contacting the local authority for anything. Until I started working with them 15 years ago, I didn't have a clue what they did or why I would ever need to contact them. So it's an interesting one, is the demographics, but GDPR coming along and some of the accessibility stuff that we're doing has made it even more difficult to get that data as being, you know, correct and proper data. So we are making some assumptions there about who's using it.
Accessibility. Sorry, David, have you got any more? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tony. That's really helpful.
Just quickly, Tony.
No worries.
Tony and Tim, because so there was a question about accessibility with chatbots. What is the accessibility issues, guidelines, things to look out for when you're looking at chatbots? That's to both of you.
Tony, do you want to go first?
Tim looks
or do you want
like
me
he's
to
going to say something.
He's getting fired up.
All right, so there's an easy but slight cop-out answer to that, and that answer is that the web accessibility standards are obviously well worn in now. So if you're presenting a chatbot over the web, then that's fine, but because you just fit it within those standards. But we were talking about many different channels earlier, and it does raise accessibility questions, because you might very well want to support channels which imply a mode of use. So, you know, voice channels and anybody who might be hearing impaired, for example, you know, is an example. Now, the short answer is you can stick to the accessibility standards, but there is a much bigger answer, and the bigger answer, and one of the huge potentials here, and this has been proven, I think Southampton did a great case study on this, is that there's a lot of draw towards, particularly the voice channel, for supporting the independent living agenda in adult social care, but it does raise questions about accessibility. So I think you're right to raise it, and I'm sure other people on the call have got more experience of this than I have. In some cases, it's quite clear when you give a tick. In some other cases, you can get into a point where you try and do the right thing. Customers want it. It's definitely going to be good for citizens and the council. But yeah, you've got to be careful. That would be my answer. But Toni, anything to change on that, right?
I was just going to say, in terms of the hearing impaired community, that was some, you know, we do get good feedback from that quite often. That's something that comes through. There's also the opportunity going forward, I'm sure, to be able to talk in different languages through the chat function. So you know, I know that is something that's on the horizon. In terms of like the look and feel of it, my web team were involved in the design and the styling, and so they would obviously make sure that from an accessibility regulations point of view that that's all up to the standards that it needs to be. So I think it's a really wonderful tool in terms of accessibility for people to be able to use. That's my view on it.
Excellent. Thank you. Daniel, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a question regarding sort of the promotion and improving the awareness of chatbot. We've done some pilots previously, or even sort of testing with web chat and things like that, and you know, not for council-wide, but you know, individual services. And a lot of the time, the feedback we get from the customer service team is that, oh yeah, people aren't using it, but we think it's because they're sort of not aware of it. So I'd just be interested to know how you've sort of promoted the use of chatbot during this time.
Well, do you know what, Daniel? The main thing was our staff quickly realising that, oh hell, we are getting a load of extra contact and we can't deal with it. So we need to proactively shove people down this channel. So it kind of went from, like I said in my presentation, about people in terms of staff being quite reluctant to promote it and just making assumptions. Oh no, they wouldn't want to use it. You know, all the people that ring us are old. You know, they don't want to sort of go down this route. They've gone from that to now not only saying to customers, do you know that you can do this online, and if you get stuck, there's ways and means that you will get help and support online. Not only have they gone from that, they will also think of things that they are getting through, which is regular low value contact, and then push that back to their team leader to say, we keep getting calls about this and it's silly. You know, the bot could be answering that. So it's kind of come full circle in terms of that. I mean, we do quite a lot of through our comms team. They will always promote chat, going online and chat first before other channels. We haven't quite gone as far as taking our phone number off the website yet, but it is buried deep down. You would struggle to get to it easily. So, and then, you know, like now it's coming up to annual billing. We're doing a campaign whereby if we get X number of people moved over to paperless billing, we're going to be doing this tree planting thing. So we're doing ask Vera about how you can help save the environment and those sorts of messaging, just to encourage people to get on and use it, really.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
Excellent. And just Mike Ward, quickly, what you were talking about, and Tim, you might be able to help Mike here, you might not. Were you talking about the Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp?
Yes, that's
the integration piece. Is that right?
Yeah, only in as much as for us, the product we've got from Netcall allows us to create chatbots, and then we can use the same script just by hooking it up to Facebook Messenger. So we just need to log it into our corporate Facebook account, if you like, and then you can have these sort of delayed conversations that we think would be quite interesting, as you would do a messenger conversation with anyone else that you knew. So you could even start the request one day and finish it the following day, or just to let people know when, you know, if they contact us late at night, we can deal with the question the following morning. Right. And then if that's a success, you know, I think at some point there's a plan to add a WhatsApp integration as well then on the roadmap. But obviously I dropped out for an hour or so because I had to attend another meeting. But one thing I was going to say as well, since we put our chatbots in, I checked earlier on, and we're getting about 100 conversations a week at the moment. So this is, obviously from our perspective, it's something that's worthwhile doing.
And what sort of conversation? Is there any sort of commonality around the service area or the service request around those 100 conversations?
I don't know, but I can tell you. Let me see. The services that we can chat about with the bots are to do with business grants at the moment, obviously, council tax, car parks, waste and recycling, general inquiries. But one of the first things that I think people have probably alluded to today, one of the easiest and first things that we could do with a bot is just use it to signpost people over to the right form on the website. And it didn't take, obviously it doesn't take a great deal of logic or knowledge to do that. But again, you can get them onto the form really quickly. So just as an additional way of navigating your way around the website, which seems to be quite useful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a comment on that. I think it's true to say that on the one hand, if the website's like perfect, you wouldn't need that facility because it would be so easy to find your way around. But one of the bits of feedback that we've gathered is that there are an awful lot of people who aren't frequent contactors to the council, but they're not sure whether they're contacting the right authority. So taking that ambiguity out of, yes, you're in the right place, providing comfort, and this is the area that you should be talking to in the council, or indeed, no, well, you're not in the right place, but here's the place to go. That in itself is really useful because I guess we're all used to the structure of authorities and the way that it relates to local government, central government, and housing associations. But a lot of people aren't. That would be one observation. Getting back onto the channels, I guess the ideal is to be able to support a large number of channels in a very similar way with very similar journeys. The thing that fights against that slightly is that on a web channel, you've got the opportunity for a much richer interface, particularly when it's important to select, well, let's say a property with a particular UPRN, and that's essential to support the back-end process. And that, from a drop-down that you can put in the middle of a web chat, even if there's a bit of work on styling that so that it fits nicely, that's okay, accepted. Lots of chats go up with that sort of thing. But of course, if you're on a text interface, that doesn't sit so easily. So there's some, quite apart from the technical integration, moving that totally to one side, there's some channel sensitivity to implementation. And you might take the decision that you want to keep it completely consistent and go with effectively a text or speech channel everywhere. But of course, that would limit you in some visual respects. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Burnett.
I had a question.
Fire away, Louisa.
One was an observation based on something that you said earlier, Tony, around, people that have, these tasks that they want to get done with the council, that they're engaging with the council. These are, I like seeing them as paying customers. They're paying for a service. We definitely found that in our research, that part of the frustration that people have when they can't get through to someone, it's like, well, I'm paying for this, and you can't switch. There's no alternative. So that really exacerbates that kind of need to get in touch with someone. So that was just an observation that, it's really interesting. That's especially the waste one. I spoke to several people saying that if their bin doesn't get collected, then they're taking their rubbish to work. Well, used to, they were taking it to work or having to go to the recycling spots, especially if they've got babies and nappies and the rest of it. So it really helps to add context to that. The question I had was more as an ongoing thing, like because I'm very interested in the research part. Research never really ends. And I think you're right in your point in saying that I don't believe that very big or lengthy research projects are kind of needed, really. I think we definitely adopt just enough research to help you move forward. You know, that's why we do this stuff. But I was curious to hear more about what the future looks like, you know, in terms of your next steps and what your experience has been and how you're finding the managing of all those learnings that you're being able to capture now that you have something live and it's running. How are you capturing those learnings, and how do you plan to continue iterating on your solution?
Thank you. There's a lot there. I'll try and remember it. Yeah, so I think, like I said earlier, because we implemented chat such a long time ago, a lot of these things are sort of done through a gut feel and what almost feels like it's the natural next steps. So we had chat on very few pages, and then we opened that up, and then we messed around with the standard responses, and then we went 24/7 with it, and then we got a chatbot, and it just seems like these natural next steps and this natural progression. The one thing that we've got on our side is that because it's quite a mature thing for us, we know that people use it. We don't have to have those arguments with stakeholders about why we should do these things, or, you know, there's a lot there from our stakeholders that's kind of, they trust that if we want to move it on, that we're doing it for the right reasons, and that we will make a success out of it. A lot of the direction that we go in, a lot of it's a budget thing. If it's something that we can do relatively cheaply, but we see it as a quick win and we see it as progression, then we'll do it. We'll take the plunge. I'm probably saying all the wrong things here to a user research person, because none of what I've said it's because what customers want. But we do obviously do a lot with customers. So when we had our face-to-face office, what we would do is, while there were people in the queue or there were people sitting waiting, we'd do some sort of side-by-side interaction with them on iPads or on our self-serve computers, and say, rather than waiting to speak to a face-to-face advisor where you might be waiting 20 minutes, I can put you on a computer now, and we can talk to somebody who's upstairs in the contact center, and they'll be able to help you with that. So we would kind of we were approaching it from all different angles. In terms of capturing it all, you know, there's a lot that doesn't get captured, I'll be quite honest with you, for a whole host of reasons, mainly time and resources. What we do capture is we capture where we can improve our website, where we can improve customer experience. You know, we capture information from teams in terms of, you know, like I've said, I think this is something that you could answer with the chatbot, and we'll think very carefully around, is that the right thing to do? I think you had a bit of a matrix up earlier about at what point customers would prefer to speak to a person rather than do things over a bot. So even though it's something that might sound like it's quite low value and quite a repetitive thing and not really require a great depth of knowledge from the advisor, if it was, for example, registering a death, which is a very straightforward process, that's not something we would choose to put on a bot at this time, you know, because we still feel that human, you know, human aspect of that is quite important, even though it's quite a straightforward process. So, and also because we're living in a new world now, we're having to catch things in all sorts of different ways. We're still thinking about how we can bridge this gap where there was a face-to-face offering for people who might be vulnerable, who might only feel better and want to transact with the council under those circumstances, and that's not available. And how do we bridge those gaps? And is it video calling? Is it a bit of a mix of both? Is it a bit of chatbot? You know, there's all those things. So, and actual doing research with customers at this moment in time is very, very difficult because we can't get to them. So a lot of it's unknown at the moment. We're just taking baby steps and looking at making the chatbot better, so we've got these better conversational things in it, and looking at how we could move over to, you know, the stuff that Mike talked about in terms of Messenger and Facebook, because we are seeing more and more coming through on social media that we're now, it's currently just something that somebody's putting something on Twitter and we're having to pick that up and answer it rather than it being a conversational thing. So there's a whole host of things going on there, Louisa.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And actually yesterday I was with an extended family at a funeral, and one of the things that they told me about how COVID